Here in 2026, the American middle class is in a really strange spot. On the one hand, you've got new laws that are supposed to be giving working families a tax break, a little more breathing room. But on the other hand, the data tells a completely different story. It shows a middle class that's actually shrinking, getting squeezed, and really just struggling to stay afloat. So, what is the real story here? Let's get into it.
And this is the big paradox we're going to unravel today. It's the question that really cuts through all the political noise and gets right to the heart of what millions of families are feeling every single day. I mean, how can things feel so much tougher when the policies are supposedly designed to make things easier?
And look, this isn't just a gut feeling, it's a cold, hard fact. The data from the Pew Research Center is just stark. Think about it. Back in 1971, a solid 61% of American adults were considered middle income. Now, fast forward to 2026, and that number has dropped to just 51%. A 10-point drop isn't just a number on a chart, that's a massive shift in our society. The solid foundation of America is literally hollowing out. And the question is, why? All right, so to really get to the bottom of this, we're going to peel this thing back like an onion. First up, we'll look at that big tax bill that's been all over the news. Then we'll uncover a kind of hidden tax that affects pretty much everything you buy. After that, we'll dig into the insane cost of essentials and this rise of something called shadow debt. And finally, we'll pull it all together to show you the real reason the middle class is disappearing. So let's start with the most obvious piece of the puzzle, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or OBBBA. This was signed into law back in July of 2025, and it was sold to the public as this major tax cut for working families, a way to put more money right back into their pockets. So what did this bill actually do? Well, its main job was to stop a giant tax hike from hitting everybody. It basically made the 2017 tax cuts permanent. Without this law, things like the lower tax rates, the bigger standard deduction, and the larger child tax credit, they all would have just disappeared. So in a way, it saved people from a tax cliff, but for most folks, it didn't really offer new relief. It just kept the old system going. Okay, one of the big headliners of this bill was the no tax on tips idea. The concept was super simple, really powerful. Let service workers deduct up to $25,000 of their tip income from their federal taxes. I mean, for a server, a bartender, this sounds like a total game changer. But as you're about to see, the reality is a little more complicated. Yeah, the fine print here is everything. See, the deduction only works for people in about 68 very specific job codes approved by the IRS. It also doesn't count those automatic service charges that so many restaurants use now. And on top of that, the benefit starts to disappear if you make over $150,000 a year as a single person. So yeah, it's real relief for some, but a whole lot of other people are just left out. Then there's the new deduction for overtime pay. And this is where you really see a split happening. This deduction is tied to the Fair Labor Standards Act, which means it mostly just applies to hourly workers. So an hourly nurse pulling double shifts, she gets a tax break on all that extra work. But what about a salaried manager who's working 60-hour weeks to hit a deadline? Nope, no similar benefit. It's creating a clear dividing line right through the middle class. Of course, none of this stuff is free, right? These tax cuts had a price. To get the bill passed, they had to raise the cap on state and local tax deductions, the SALT cap, for some households in high tax states. The hit to the national budget is huge, too. We're talking an extra $4 trillion added to the deficit. And to pay for some of that, the law made big cuts to Medicaid, which is a critical safety net for the lower middle class. The trade-off couldn't be clearer. You get a little bit more cash from tax cuts today, but in exchange, you take on a lot more personal risk for tomorrow. Now, while everyone's looking at their income taxes, another kind of tax was quietly going up. And this one is a lot sneakier. We're talking about tariffs. And what they really are is a hidden consumption tax on almost everything you buy. So what the heck is a consumption tax? Well, it's pretty simple. It's a tax on what you spend, not what you earn. Economists call these regressive because they hit lower and middle-income families the hardest. It makes sense, right? Those households have to spend a much bigger chunk of their income on just the basics. So when tariffs make the price of those basics go up, they feel the pain the most. And the impact is, well, it's big. The Tax Foundation figured out that the 2025 tariff plan adds an extra cost of up to $1,700 a year for the average American family. Now just think about that for a second. A family might get a $1,200 tax cut from that big bill, but if their costs for everything else go up by $1,700 because of tariffs, they're actually going backwards. The money just moved from the IRS to the cash register.
And this isn't some abstract theory. This is where that hidden tax is showing up. People have even nicknamed it the Grinch tax because of what it does to the cost of everyday middle-class stuff. Toys are up an estimated 22%. Electronics, more than 5%. Even cars and clothes have seen major price jumps. This is a direct attack on the buying power of the middle class.
Okay, so this brings us to an even deeper, more fundamental problem. When you look past the taxes and tariffs, you find this massive gap between what people earn and the cost of what you could call the middle-class kit. The absolute essentials like a house and childcare. Just look at this timeline. It's wild. Since 1985, the median income in the U.S. has gone up about 252%. That sounds pretty decent, right? But in that same time, the median price for a house has shot up by over 400%. Wages just haven't stood a chance against asset inflation. It feels like the goalpost for one of the biggest parts of middle-class life have been moved so far down the field, it's almost impossible to score.
This chart right here really puts it in perspective. Back in '85, a house cost about 3.5 times what a family made in a year. Today, that ratio is 5 times. And on top of that, you've got this mortgage lock-in effect, where millions of people who have these amazing 3% mortgage rates are basically refusing to sell their homes. Who can blame them? But that crushes the housing supply and keeps prices sky high for anyone trying to buy now. Owning a home is basically becoming the gatekeeper to the middle class.
And for families with kids, wow, there's another monster expense: childcare. The federal government says families shouldn't spend more than 7% of their income on it. While the reality in 2026, the average family is spending 22%. It has become a second mortgage. It's forcing so many parents, usually moms, to actually quit their jobs because their entire paycheck would just go to paying for childcare anyway. So you've got wages that aren't keeping up and essentials that cost more than ever. So how are people supposed to fill that gap? Well, for a growing number of people, the answer is debt. But it's not the kind of debt you might be thinking of. A whole new fragile world of financing has popped up. We are seeing an absolute explosion in these buy now, pay later services, especially with younger people. And here's the really alarming trend. People aren't just using this stuff for a new TV or a vacation. They're using it for groceries, for gas, for just the basic necessities. That is a massive red flag that cash flow is incredibly tight. And you can see the stress building. Almost a third of Gen Z consumers who use these services have already missed a payment. And here's the crucial part. This is shadow debt. Most of it never gets reported to the credit bureaus. That means a person's real debt level is hidden, totally masking the true financial risk in the system until it's way too late. Even if you just look at regular credit cards, the warning lights are flashing bright red. National delinquency rates are the highest they've been since 2011. But that average number hides a K-shaped story. As you can see here, the pain is really concentrated in lower income states, while folks in wealthier households are doing just fine. The middle is literally being pulled apart from both ends. So, after peeling back all those layers, the tax bill, the hidden tariff tax, the crazy cost of essentials, and the rise of all this shadow debt, we can finally put the pieces together. We can finally answer that first question. What is the real reason the American middle class is vanishing? It all boils down to these 3 powerful things happening all at once. First, you have asset gatekeeping. Your social class in 2026 has less to do with your salary and more to do with whether or not you own a home. Second, there's the fiscal trade-off. Our policies have given people a little more cash from tax cuts, but they've stripped away the security of the social safety net, which puts all the risk right on the individual's shoulders. And finally, the consumption squeeze. Any tiny benefit you might have gotten from those income tax cuts has been completely erased by the hidden tariff tax on everything you buy. So in the end, the middle class isn't just shrinking, it's being completely redefined. It's not this broad, stable plateau that most people could count on reaching anymore. Instead, as one analysis I read put it, it's become a precarious ridge, narrow, steep, and increasingly difficult to climb. And the question that leaves all of us with is, what on earth is it going to take to make that climb possible again?